Today's gospel comes from Matthew, the 11th chapter. Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. This is the gospel of our Lord. And now may Jesus, who rose from death to new life, bring Easter vibrancy into every day of your life. Amen. Greetings, friends, in that great name of Jesus, whose death and resurrection opens to us all the way of everlasting life. I am Pastor Drew Tucker, and it is my joy to serve as the Executive Director of HopeWood Outdoors, your Lutheran outdoor ministry organization here in the state of Ohio. No matter where you're watching this sermon from, or when you are watching it, I want you to know that HopeWood Outdoors is grateful for you, for your partnership. We are strengthened by your stewardship, and we are excited to serve you not only at camp during the summer, but throughout the year, on site and in your congregation. If you've got retreat needs, event needs, new ideas shared for ministry, please reach out, because this idea of ministry is something that we share together as God's church. Now, my close friends, and especially my wife, find it pretty funny that the Synod Office has invited me to preach as a part of the 2024 Year of Rest series. Now, to be clear, I didn't have to preach on rest itself, but instead the invitation was to provide rest for your pastors and deacons who preach so frequently and so faithfully, for they indeed deserve rest. But honestly, I think we all here in our day and age need to think more deeply about rest. I decided to take this opportunity to dive deep into rest as a topic because, well, I'm just really bad at resting. And that is a problem. Not just because I need more sleep, though that's true. My mom recently asked me about the bags under my eyes, so that's how well it's going for me right now. Not just because it sets a bad example for our staff and campers, though that is also true and equally troubling. The fact that I'm bad at resting is a problem also because God calls us to rest as creatures and as Christians. That's why this sermon's title is Called to Rest. Now, I know that I'm not alone in my lack of commitment to rest. And while workaholism isn't necessarily in the DSM-5, which is the standard of diagnosis for personality disorders, there is plenty of evidence to suggest there is an obsession with work amongst Americans. There's a cult of business that's obsessed with activity, that demands the sacrifice of our calendars, of our wallets, and all too often, our bodies. In fact, that sounds like more than an obsession. That sounds like idolatry. This idol takes various shapes in different situations of our lives. For some, it's one job that has their entire devotion, plus all the lawn care at home, the house projects, and the other kinds of labor that take up practically all of our time. But for others, it's the gig economy, where a number of part-time jobs and side hustles drive people to endless hours of work. And for still others, it's the combination of rehearsals and practices and meetings and volunteer opportunities and extracurricular activities. Who has time for rest amidst all this? Now, I want to be clear that for many in our society, this comes as a necessity due to factors outside of their control. With the impacts of inflation over the last couple of years, some of this work is simply driven by the rising cost of living. One of the hurdles to rest is simply how much it costs to survive. If life is too expensive to allow rest, that is not a person's fault, not one individual's fault, but the fault of our entire country, our economy, our culture, our community. And we have to take that seriously. But of course, that's also not the only issue at hand. There's plenty of people with more than enough resources that still work for far too long. And I honestly probably fall somewhere into this category. We are not wealthy, to be sure, but as a married couple with no kids and 2 full-time jobs, I don't need to work more in order to survive. But I also happen to be an author who has published books and articles. I'm also an editor who is responsible for recruiting writers for a devotion and then editing and posting their submissions. I'm also an education and leadership consultant who works with multiple clients. And I don't know how to stop, it seems. But why? Not just why do I do these things, though that is a legitimate question, but why do I fill all this time that God has called me to rest? In fact, I wonder why it's so hard for all of us to rest. In our readings today, not just Matthew, but in the Psalm and Jeremiah as well, there's a number of different depictions of rest. The psalmist, it seems, finds rest to be easy. Good for them. That's not been my experience, at least not always. At other times, we can be like Jeremiah's audience and be presented with the opportunity to rest, but then defiantly say, we will not take the path of rest. The idol of work, really the idol of productivity, feels far too tempting to ignore. And even when Jesus speaks directly to us through the gospel of an easy yoke and a light burden, it seems we just don't believe it. It doesn't seem that we trust that Jesus means for us not to work. That Jesus doesn't just want to break our back, but instead Jesus wants to find rest. Is there work that will allow us to rest as well? Now, like all idols, there is something good about productivity. After all, the fall's harvest depends on winter's tilling and spring's planting and summer's tending. Work has worth, and there's nothing inherently wrong with productive work. Instead, the problem, it seems to me, is that we have overemphasized work's goodness in ways that make productivity too much of a good thing. And I know, some say you can never have too much of a good thing. But consider water and food, 2 of my favorite things. Certainly good things. But too much of them at once, though? On one end, there's drowning. And on the other end, there's cardiopulmonary problems galore. You can have too much of a good thing, and work can be one of those things that is simply too much. Every good thing has its limits, including work. And rest is the sacred limit that ensures the continued goodness of our work. Rest is the sacred limit that ensures the continued goodness of our work. Because let's be honest, just because you work too much doesn't mean you work very well. In fact, sometimes more work leads to less productivity because in excess, work becomes less efficient and less effective. Work is not pained by rest. Work is supported by faithful rest. Rest is how we put work into its proper context. After all, it was Israel who heard God's promise of the Sabbath even during a 40-year wandering in the wilderness and found time to rest. Even under the threat of starvation, fleeing the oppression of Pharaoh, God's people had time for Sabbath. So why don't you and I make time for it too? I think here, in light of the resurrection dawn, in light of the Easter season, one reason we do not embrace God's rest is that we do not embrace God's blessing. The original blessing God gave us in creation and the blessing that we seek and find in an empty tomb. You see, as Lutherans, we rightly emphasize the presence of sin in our world. After all, people who are saved by grace through faith need to know what they are saved from. But sometimes our emphasis on original sin overshadows the original blessing that God bestowed on all creation. It was God who, before the first sin ever occurred, looked at humanity, looked at all of creation together and said, "Ah, yes, you are very good." Our refusal to rest, then, it seems, is itself a sin. We look to the psalmist, as human as you or I, and we say, oh, they're an unrealistic idealist who has no idea what the demands of 21st century look like. Look at those who received Jeremiah's prophecy, and we refuse God's ways and the rest that comes with them. And instead, we follow them down the path of everlasting work instead of everlasting life. Here in the Easter season, the power of Christ's resurrection looms large. And it is the abundance of life of Jesus that overcomes sin and death and the devil, that triumvirate of evil that seeks to sap all life on earth. But because of this Easter dawn, the consequences of sin are no longer ours to bear. The devil's battle cry is silenced by a single proclamation from our Prince of Peace. And even death, though still at work in our world, no longer has the final say. God's work through Holy Week and through Easter not only reminds us of the original command to rest, but reminds us that we're able to rest because God has already worked miracles on our behalf. So to choose rest is to reveal our trust in Christ's resurrection, that the work we cannot do has already been done. To prioritize Sabbath is to embrace that Easter truth in our everyday lives. And I imagine you, like I, still might need some convincing of that sometimes. I need reminded that God's work, first in creation and then in redemption, is more than enough for us. I'm kind of obstinate, if I'm going to be honest. So even though I know that God's commanded rest, invited rest, even worked miracles so we can rest, I wonder, what difference will rest make? Fortunately, people much smarter than I am, and with much more patience, have studied over years the impacts of rest on human existence, on these bodies that God has given us. And wouldn't you know it, the God who created us and calls us to rest made our bodies and minds in ways that benefit from rest. Consider prayer, one of those active kinds of rest. All throughout Scripture, we read that prayer is a priority, but that's more than just some religious dictate disconnected from reality, because you stopping to pray keeps you connected to God in relationship and, believe it or not, has physiological benefits. Research from a neuroscientist named Andrew Newberg has shown that when you take intentional time to pray for as little as 5 to 7 minutes a day, you redirect energy into the areas of your brain that foster things like compassion and empathy. You know, the kinds of things that Jesus calls us to live in the world. By daily taking time to slow down and to make space for conversation with God, we literally become more like Christ through prayerful rest. Sleep also has incredible value for these God-given bodies. It might not feel active to you, but getting enough sleep has diverse benefits for your activity, from enhancing your memory to increasing your attention span, even promoting your heart's health. God has designed this body not for constant work, but for a good balance of work and rest. Good work is balanced by good rest, and that is good for your body. If our body is a temple of God, one of the best ways that we can care for this temple is to give it the sleep that it needs. And it's even true that embracing the nature around us, the great outdoors, is a kind of rest in creation that invigorates us. Now, yes, of course, the camp guy is going to proclaim the merits of being outside, but I promise it's not just me. Multiple studies have shown that getting outside, reconnecting with the earth, from forests and grasslands to farms and sports fields, have very real benefits for your physical and mental health. From improved respiratory function and a boosted immune system to decreased depression and increased motivation. Embracing the rest of creation in playful, purposeful rest is beneficial to our minds and our bodies. All of these serve as reminders to me that rest is purposeful. It's not just boredom, but instead an intentional pause in this world that God has built in our lives. In the very center of this moment, that God is present and that God is enough. Rest is a deliberate digression from the daily grind, and that rest restores our bodies, our minds, and our spirits for the lives that God has called us to live. And it's because God calls us to live that God calls us to rest. Ultimately, dear friends, life in Christ, the life made possible by the miracle of Easter, is shaped by the balance of action and rest. Rest is that reminder that Jesus has already accomplished the impossible for us by ensuring sin will not separate us from God. Rest is life's constant refrain for our work, that it will not save us because God has already saved us. These bodies are more than machines, and rest reminds us that from the very first moments of creation, we reflect the images of God. Rather than a waste of time, rest is a God-given gift of time well spent. Rest is good for our bodies, good for our minds, good for our souls, from the good God who made us, the good God who saved us, the one who looked in creation and said, "Ah, yes, you are very good." And then, friends, do you know what God did on that next day? God rested. May we all, the images of God, reflect our God in rest as well. Amen.